Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone attending the League of Railway Women's Future of Sustainability in Rail session. We're so happy to have you. I'm Katie Katchel. I'm an LRW member and a partner at a railroad government relations firm in Washington, D.C., and I'll be coordinating this session. We have a great lineup today and a great discussion ahead. Before we get started on this session, here are a few housekeeping items. There are two ways to listen in, shown here. If your computer audio isn't working, you can use your telephone to dial in. You can find that number by going to your control panel, clicking the audio pane, and then clicking telephone. Attendees are muted, so please type your questions into that question box in your control panel. I will be relaying your questions to the panel. And lastly, before we get started, here is LRW's Code of Conduct. Allow you to read that. And let's get started. I have the pleasure of introducing your session moderator, Daryl Wilson, Assistant VP of Government Relations at Norfolk Southern Corporation. Daryl monitors legislative and regulatory developments in the U.S. Congress, as well as the Surface Transportation Board, the Federal Highway Administration, and the Federal Railroad Administration. Daryl also leads the development of public-private partnerships between the U.S. Department of Transportation and NS. Prior to NS, Daryl supported for over 7 years the chairman on the Congressional Committee with jurisdiction over U.S. freight rail policy and oversight. Take it away, Daryl.
Thanks, Katie. There I am. Hi everyone. And I guess it's a good morning, a good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. So for me, it's very much decided good afternoon. I'm very excited to be a part of this League on Railway Women's panel on sustainability. And I want to talk real quickly about my experience over time with Norfolk Southern. During my 20 years at NS, the topic of sustainability really came into the picture when I became a member of the newly formed Environmental Policy Committee at NS in 2007. The next year, we published our first sustainability report in 2008. And a member of the team that helped review and write that first report, it really began a journey over the next 13 years, leading in many areas, internal and external, on sustainability. There were a lot of successes and a few misses along that road. By 2018, NS changed the name of our report to the Corporate Social Responsibility Report. Over more than a decade later, we had realized it was time to expand our thinking on what sustainability is and what it means to be responsible as a company to that role throughout all of our business practices. And again, in 2020, with the release of our 13th report, Norfolk Southern further refined its thinking by renaming the report our Corporate Responsibility Report, which further broadened what this effort means beyond just environmental efforts. Whether it's a fully battery-powered locomotive built as a public-private partnership between NS and the FRA and DOE, Department of Energy, yes, a truly zero-emissions locomotive that NS did build, or the planting of over 1 million trees in the Mississippi Delta, or our current efforts to embrace diversity, inclusion, and equity in our workforce, sustainability is about the long haul. As railroads, we know what the long haul is. That's what we do every day for our customers. At NS, in my experience, this effort is about trying results. It's about trying new things and seeing what works, always with an eye towards good results and not just good intentions, because good results are almost always sustainable practices. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists today. Really a super heavy-hitting panel, and I'm really a pleasure to be a part of this. First, I'd like to introduce Deva Kaitala. Deva received her Juris Doctorate from Texas Tech University School of Law in 2002. She immediately went to work at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Fort Worth District as Deputy Division Counsel. And after 7 decorated years with the Corps, David then joined Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway in 2009 in the law department with a focus on the environment. She has since worked in engineering services and held several other expanded roles in project development. She currently holds 2 positions as General Director of Construction Permitting and Sustainability and Senior General Attorney 2 in the Environmental Department. That's a lot of hats to wear. Currently, she leads multifaceted technical teams overseeing the Environmental Audit Program, Construction Permitting Program, and oversees BNSF Sustainability Report and the environmental section of the annual report. That's a busy. She is a very busy person. Dava is part of the environmental leadership team in BNSF and vice chair of the environmental committee of the American Railway Development Association. And in her free time, if she has any, she spends time with her husband, John, and their two children, Addie and Alex, in Arlington, Texas. Please welcome me and join me in welcoming Dava Kaitala. Dava?
Thanks, Daryl. It is wonderful and such a pleasure to join you today. Let me turn on my camera really quickly. So I am very excited to talk with you first about what sustainability is, and then a little bit about one of the ways that BNSF really lives the sustainability message. So if we can go to the next slide. This is maybe my favorite definition of sustainable development, and it comes from the UN. So sustainable development is about meeting our needs, but also not compromising meeting the needs of future generations. And as Daryl just mentioned, I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, so I very much want to ensure that they have just as nice of a world as I did growing up. So next slide. This is something that you very commonly see in discussions about sustainability. One of the things that we really concentrate on and that we talk a lot about is that sustainability and environmentalism are really two different things. Environmentalism is a focus just on the planet portion of this slide, whereas sustainability looks at this as the ability to balance the three. So if you think about it, planet is pretty self-explanatory. As I just mentioned, it's really traditional environmentalism. Profit, traditional capitalism. People, though, is kind of interesting. So people encompasses a lot of different groups, not just our employees. They're a very important group, and not just our customers, although, again, a very important group. But it also includes those people who live in the towns that our railways go through. We also take their needs into consideration as we're designing our project and running our railroad. So next slide, please. We could look at any one of those three circles and see what happens when they get out of whack. I just chose profit because it's probably the easiest to grasp in a very short conversation. When profit is weighted too heavily, a company could choose to ignore laws, but we know what would happen then. They're likely to get sued, they're likely to be fined, and eventually they're likely to go out of business because that's just not a sustainable way to run a company. On the other hand, for instance, we couldn't at BNSF say that we are going to wait until we have a full fleet of no emission locomotives, and until then we were just going to stop running trains. That would be weighing profit too lightly, because in the meantime, while we were waiting for that fleet of zero emission locomotives, we would be making no money, and we wouldn't be able to survive. Then we couldn't employ our people, which would be really bad news for me, and of course BNSF's other employees. So we really have to consider this a balanced system. So next slide. So a lot of times when we talk about sustainability, we talk about carbon, and carbon is certainly a very important topic, and it's going to be covered later in the presentation. But I want to talk about sustainability in an area that I'm very, very passionate about, and that's the idea of green infrastructure. So if we can go to the next slide, and it'll give you a definition here of green infrastructure. And I'll let you read that on your own, but in a nutshell, the idea of green infrastructure is using Mother Nature and treating her as an ally as opposed to an adversary. And really thinking about the fact that Mother Nature has had millions of years of basically research and development, and has really designed some systems that work extremely well. So why don't we take advantage of those? So we can go to the next slide. Engineered green infrastructure is not something, obviously, that I created. It's something that a lot of people work on, and it has a whole lot of different names. And so I've listed some here. Sustainable design, natural infrastructure, green-gray infrastructure, green infrastructure, design for the environment. But my favorite thing to call it is on the next slide. It is smart railroading. If you are looking at truly sustainable green infrastructure, next slide, it has the following benefits. It has wonderful safety impacts. It's easier to permit. A lot of times it's cheaper, even if not on day one. If you look at the life cycle cost, it is often less expensive, and it works as well, if not better, than pure gray options. So if we can go to the next slide. Here are 3 examples with pictures. The middle picture is a detention basin. The left-hand side is some pervious versus impervious pavement. That means the pavement that you see on the right that's less shiny is allowing the water to seep through. The pavement on the left is very shiny, and that's where water's pooling. And then the picture on the right is a bioswale that is along a railway. So next slide. Here are a couple of other examples. Non-arbored ditches, bottomless culverts, and then slopes planted with native vegetation. This particular picture is one of my favorite areas of the railroad. It's up in Seattle along one of our bridges, where there's a park that runs really, frankly, on either side of this bridge. And they've planted it with our permission and our support with a lot of native vegetation. So what we're seeing there is they aren't having the kind of wave action erosion that they might see otherwise, because again, it's Mother Nature doing what she does best. She's preventing erosion by using the root systems of the plants. So next slide. This is something that we did at BNSF that started out a little bit shaky, but now is something that's a source of great pride. We actually built a simulated shortgrass prairie on our headquarters. And so what that means is every spring, if you come onto BNSF property, you will see these amazing fields of wildflowers. And one of the coolest things that they do is they act as a place for butterflies and bees that are on their migratory paths to stop for a drink of water and a source of food. This was a really, really cool project that now people are really excited every spring when they see the flowers come back. That first year though, oh, I sweated it a little bit because, you know, they are natural flowers. They take a little while to get going. And so the first year we had a lot of phone calls asking if we should be concerned that we couldn't pay our bills and mow our grass because it did look a little bit raggedy. But in the long run now, it's something that we all take a great deal of pride in. So next slide, please. This is also a really cool example. This is one of our first forays into the world of green infrastructure. We had 4 bridges on the Oren line in Wyoming where we were just having some amazing erosion issues. And we had tried all sorts of gray infrastructure fixes, and we couldn't figure out how to solve the problem. And what finally solved the problem was a green-gray infrastructure solution. You can see on the bottom that we have some very large rocks that we placed. They're interspersed with some grass seed that help hold them into place. But then along the slope itself, we used native grasses. We talked with the Department of Transportation to find out what they were using. We have some wildflowers. And then we also have down drains and drainage tees that allow the water to move in a more natural and gentler way. So it still gets where it needs to go, but it does so without taking out our right of way. So next slide. Okay, I will turn it back over to Daryl.
Thanks, David. And I was supposed to, what a wonderful presentation. I was supposed to introduce you all at the beginning, but unfortunately, I told Katie this, I wanted to do each one individually. So it looks like I'm going to get to do that. So sorry about that. So Karen, give me a second here. I know I'm going to have at least a couple of questions for Dave on greening infrastructure. Our next presenter is Karen Cecil, Director of Global Environmental Sustainability at Cummings. And so if you are in the rail industry, Cummings is not a stranger to any of us. Karen leads the cross-functional, cross-business governance structure that is responsible for setting the direction for environmental actions, including strategy development, evaluating risk and opportunities, goal setting, engaging internal and external stakeholders, transparent environmental reporting, and business integration. Karen's 20 years of experience in quality management, lean operations, supply chain, executive level problem solving, and leading complex change brings a vast lens of what sustainability can look like throughout Cummins products lines. She has led the creation of Cummins' first comprehensive global environmental sustainability plan with 2020 goals, as well as the Planet 2050 strategy announced last year. Karen is a certified Six Sigma Master Black Belt and experienced Simplex Innovative Thinking Process Facilitator. She holds an Executive Master of Sustainability Leadership from Arizona State University. She's a Sun Devil of Sustainability. And with that, please welcome Karen Cecil.
Thank you so much, Daryl. And first of all, I want to say I love that you have a League of Railway Women. It's awesome. And it's a real pleasure and an honor to be part of this session. So thank you. So you want to go to the next slide? I don't know if we're having difficulty.
Are we able to move the slides?
Should I try to share mine? Or
There we go.
Well, that's perfect because environmental sustainability is a journey, just like virtual meetings are. And so, so we're not new to environmental sustainability. We just didn't call it that back in the day. You know, starting back with the product emissions that we all know and love for NOx and particulate matter, but also like starting remanufacturing back in 1962. And this was more a business opportunity than sustainability, but now a really critical piece to the circular economy. And we set our first goal for greenhouse gas in our facilities in 2006. You know, been really hitting and setting and meeting those goals for a long time and setting new ones. In 2012, we decided, you know, that we were really looking at greenhouse gas and climate change, but there's more to environmental sustainability. So we did a life cycle analysis and created the team that Daryl mentioned, and we set goals in 2020. And so, you know, if you're going to set goals in 2014 for 2020, might as well do it during a pandemic, right? This is our goal year, so this should be interesting. And then in 2017, you know, it was just a real understanding that things are changing a lot faster, right, than what we you know, discussed and studied and analyzed in 2012. And so what we decided is that actually sustainability was going faster than our 2020 plan. So we wanted to create a new strategy and announce it during our 100th anniversary. And so that was in 2019. So if we go to the next slide. Thank you. And, you know, really sustainability is a long-term strategy. So it gives you an opportunity to really think, because you want to be adaptive to the changes. And some of the things to think about is, you know, what if a crisis caused rapid change to policy? And that could happen, right? A social uprising and like, hey, you've got to go fast. So, you know, rapid changes to policy are more difficult. But what if investors demand decarbonization? And honestly, we're meeting with investors for Climate 100 and actually large investors talking about our climate plan and how we're doing 2 times a year. So it is more important now. But what if, you know, customers are driving requirements beyond regulations? We're also seeing that because they're setting science-based targets. And so that's moving beyond what we even have as a regulatory framework now. But there's other things like water scarcity. So we use a lot of metal, and metal is the second highest energy and water intense, you know, processes that we have. So water scarcity means perhaps supply chain disruption. So these are all things to really think through in the realm of sustainability. And the idea here is adaptive management, and that's the key. How do you adapt to these changes? Next slide, please. And so when we were talking about this for Planet 2050, we looked This was announced in November of 2019, and it's actually an acronym because, you know, at Cummins, acronyms rule, right? And so, but really, the P is about prosperity. And this means that, you know, our mission statement, you know, making people's lives better by powering a more prosperous world, that prosperity actually requires a healthier planet. So we depend on that for lots of things like the water and biodiversity and things like that. So we see it actually part of our prosperity chain. And so that's a new way of thinking. But we also want to be leaders in the space. It's going to take advocacy. For nurture, we set science-based targets, which, you know, climate scientists have said this is where we need to be for our sector. This is a plan about the environment. We do have other aspects, as David was talking about, for, you know, health and safety and all the other sustainability realms. And together it's going to really take a lot of collaboration and partnership. We can't hit any of our goals on our own, to be honest, or I guess we can hit some. But, you know, what's different for us is there's a full range of products included in this plan. And in our 2020 plan, we talked about recycling and zero disposal, which are still important. But now we're looking at how do we eliminate waste, right? If materials and metal use a lot of energy and water, then how do we make sure that we're only using really what we need to help drive customer success? Next slide, please. So this is Planet 2050. It's broken into 3 priorities, and we have 2050 aspirational targets for them, and we have 2030 goals. So this is kind of in line with, the UN SDGs, the, UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the Paris Climate Agreement. So the 3 priorities are that our communities are better because we're there, and the 2050 aspirational target is that we have a net positive impact in every community in which we operate. So the sum of our environmental good would be greater than our local environmental footprint. The next one is doing our part to address climate change and air emissions. So this builds in on all the great work that technology has done to help with NOx and particulate matter. But now we're talking carbon neutrality, right? That's an addition to that. Carbon neutral technologies, carbon neutral facilities, and actually near zero pollution in our local Cummins facilities. And then third, last but definitely not least, is using natural resources in the most sustainable way. Here, that one's simple, it's just nothing wasted. And this really draws in on the circular economy principles. And you see over for our 2030 goals, if the aspirational is the North Star and it's kind of driving what the future looks like, our 2030 goals are more set in like the milestone to get there. We have science-based targets. We're on our 4th greenhouse gas goal and have set an absolute target of a 50% reduction. Oops. And so, so with that, we have the 2030. We also have the circular economy goals, and so those are also thank you. You see, like creating a circular life cycle plan for every part. This is really being very thoughtful and mindful of the amount of material we use and how we use it, and how we, what's the end of life plan for that material. And we think it's really critical as we think through some of the major themes for the future and what the world is expecting. And we honestly see our Planet 2050, the aspirational targets, as more of a license to operate. We think by 2050, that may be the case. Okay, if we go to the next slide, please. when we get to the next slide, I think a couple of the things I wanted to talk about was, how does technology really play a role in what we're doing? And one of them is the tier 0 to tier 4 engine systems. And Cummins was the first, we powered the first, tier 4 certified locomotive. And that's really important. So you're talking about 95% particulate matter and over 80% NOx reductions. This is really important for local health benefits. And so, when we're thinking of what we're doing, it's technology now and in the future, and both are very critical actually for this improvement. It's also about visualization, and we think, things like Industry 4.0 in our facilities, but this digital solution that helps us, with these engine monitoring systems for equipment health. So you're thinking condition-based maintenance, extending the life to overhaul, extending maintenance intervals, also very important sustainability issues. But last but not least is, how do we go to this low carbon technology, right? And so what does that look like? And there's not going to be one solution for every market, but what are they? Because it could be different by customer, it could be different by regions, and by applications. But Cummins Technologies powered the first hydrogen fuel cell train, and this is in Europe. It's a 1,000-kilometer range, 300 passengers, 140 kilometers per hour. And what this does, it converts hydrogen and oxygen into electricity, emitting only steam and water. So its emissions are 0. And so this is, looking at a snapshot of all the different things that technology and innovation can provide us. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Wonderful presentation. And with that, it is my pleasure to make the final introduction today of all of our panelists, as they say, last but not least. And as I will say just real quickly, as a company, Cummins, that we all rely on as a key supplier, it's good to see the kind of leadership you have on sustainability, Karen. Stephanie Wiggins is president and CEO of the Southern California Regional Railroad Authority. And before this intro, I would have not known that was the actual name of what is commonly known as MetroLink. Stephanie was named CEO of MetroLink in December of 2018 and assumed the role in January of 2019. Hopefully she had a good set of holidays in between that before she took on the CEO role. Since then, Stephanie has provided key leadership to her team of 258 employees and helped set a balanced approach to operating a complex 538-mile network across 7 distinct routes. MetroLink has an annual budget of just under $800 million annually, and of course, we all know in the railroad industry, we could always use more resources. But I'll leave that between Stephanie and her board. Stephanie has held high-level positions at 3 of the 5 member agencies that comprise MetroLink and is well known as a customer-focused leader who finds solutions for a regional perspective. She earned a Master of Business Administration from the USC Marshall School of Business in 2007. She received her Bachelor's of Arts degree in Business Administration from Whittier College in '92. Stephanie is the founding president of the Inland Empire chapter of Women's Transportation Seminar, WTS. She's the recipient of many awards, including the WTS Orange County Chapter's 2019 Women of the Year Award and the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials 2018 Woman Who Moved the Nation Award. She's a board member of the Los Angeles chapter of Friends of the Children, the LA division of the American Heart Association, the Greater Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce, the American Public Transportation Foundation, the Los Angeles Speech and Language Therapy Center, and advisory board member for the UCLA Lewis Center. Stephanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daryl. Also, thank you, LRW, for the invitation to participate on this distinguished panel with Karen, Deva, and Katie. I have spent my career creating and providing sustainable public transportation, and I'm pleased to share how sustainability is at the core of MetroLink and how we serve our community. Next slide. And I know there have been some internet glitches, so I'll probably just talk on so we can get to questions. But if you saw my next slide, you'd see that around us, we can't ignore the impact of the pandemic and how it's affected everything, including rail transportation. It's changed a lot about the way we think about the future, how we serve our customers, and how we keep our riders, communities, and environments safe. And what hasn't changed is that sustainability will be a major factor in how we move forward. To emerge from the pandemic smarter, better, and more essential, Metrolink as an agency is building on and accelerating our existing sustainability initiatives and technologies to bring our riders back. We saw at our lowest point a 90% decline in ridership. So COVID has provided an opportunity to rethink how we serve the region, how we build smart, sustainable cities, and how we address climate change. Our board recently adopted a 5-point recovery plan framework. It's a critical element of this framework is a triple bottom line of equity, economy, and the environment. Kind of our version of DEVA's people, profit, and planet. We want to reduce traffic and emissions and build a more resilient infrastructure that can withstand and adapt to the vulnerabilities and risks associated with climate change. Next slide. So, of course, COVID has made us more conscious about health and safety since the pandemic began. And you might think, why are we talking about health and safety in a sustainability panel? What's core for us is that pre-pandemic, our ridership reduced over 300 million vehicle miles traveled, reduced over 130,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So now with this ridership decline as a result of the pandemic, we want to get people back riding our system to ensure our sustainability future. So we have, as part of health and safety, we've implemented an aggressive program for both our riders and employees. We've got the enhanced cleaning that many of you have heard about. Face masks are required on our trains. We've got over a 99% compliance with face coverings. One of the things we've learned from our customers in a recent survey as a way to motivate them to return back to our system is they want to know that there's plenty of space to be socially distant. So our team developed an online tool that allows our riders to check literally how full is their train. And we've launched that back in July. And then last month, we partnered with more than 100 transportation agencies across the nation in a pledge to take the necessary steps to keep riders and employees safe from the spread of COVID-19. And it's part of the American Public Transportation Association's National Health and Safety Commitments Program. With APTA, we are going to have signage on our trains and our stations and really demonstrate to the public that we have a commitment to the highest safety standards. We know addressing the health and safety concerns are critical to achieving a sustainable future. Next slide. So when thinking about sustainability, we also are focusing on reducing noise pollution and emissions as part of our sustainability efforts, one that's very important to our neighbors in the communities where Metrolink operates. Our service runs through dozens of cities and communities, and whether our tracks run through these neighborhoods or we have a station, we're impacting millions of people every day, both riders and non-riders alike. And so we've created a Good Neighbor Action Plan to be a better neighbor to our communities adjacent to our major central maintenance facility by focusing on reducing our noise and emissions that impact the quality of life for the residents. And recently we completed a drainage system project that keeps runoff out of the LA River and the city sewer system. So again, being a good neighbor is a critical element of our sustainability program, and it's needed for our entire region. And so I want to move to our overall sustainability efforts in the next slide. Really, Karen talked about Cummins and the importance of their role in ensuring a clean fleet. It's no different with Metrolink's sustainability footprint. We focus on our fleet. We are proud of our sustainability efforts. One of our biggest initiatives is converting 2/3 of our fleet to Tier 4, the cleanest diesel locomotives. We're now the largest such fleet in commuter railroading. And we recently removed, during this pandemic, we retired our last Tier 0 locomotive from service and replaced it with the Tier 4. So we're very proud of that accomplishment. We continue to be aggressive. Our locomotives just passed a certification that is consistent with the Environmental Protection Agency's highest standard to ensure that they're still achieving that emission reduction even after 100,000 miles of operation. Going forward, we want to have tier 2 or higher locomotives throughout our system. We are exploring pilots of zero emission multiple units, and I was happy to hear Karen talk about hydrogen fuel cell technology. We're looking at that. Deva may or may not know, but with BNSF and Chicago Metro, they're looking at battery electric technology, and we are closely following that. So we're looking at a portfolio of zero emission technologies to advance our future. And then the next slide. So many of you may know there have been a lot of wildfires throughout California and the Western US. It's definitely evidence that the climate threats are real, that we're all facing. Now at Metrolink, we've been prepared to handle periodic flooding and wildfires and go slow heat orders, but there's nothing that has prepared us for the increase in size and scale and frequency of the extreme weather events. It requires a whole new level of attention. So we have embarked on a climate vulnerability assessment. It's a really critical component of our system because we have to ensure that we have a resilient infrastructure. So we're working with the private sector on that assessment. It's critical as we embark on our 10-year, multi-billion-dollar investment in upgrading our infrastructure. And so it's a critical part of our sustainability program because many of these infrastructure investments are supposed to last for more than 100 years. And so we've got to consider the future climate conditions as we plan and design the system. The last slide, I'll just close with just a reinforcement of how we are looking at sustainability on several levels. We're looking at that rider health and safety. We've got to make sure we get our riders back, and even more, given their contribution to actually removing more than 9 million car trips every year from our system and reducing greenhouse gases. Secondly, we're focused on supporting and protecting the communities in which we operate as a good neighbor. And then third, we're looking at the global issue of climate change and how we can contribute to a safer, cleaner, and greener future. In summary, during this pandemic, we've been transforming this disruption into an opportunity, one where sustainability is at the core of Metrolink and how we serve our community. Thank you, and I look forward to the questions.
Thanks, Stephanie. That was a wonderful presentation of the current state of play in 2020. And you're managing a lot of rapid change there across your network. And I'm really glad you made the point about the fact that, when somebody decides not to ride the train, that means they've got to get to where they want to go somehow. So it definitely impacts your greenhouse footprint. And we certainly in the Class 1 rail industry like to make that point every day, the fuel efficiency difference between over-the-road trucking and whether you want to take the long haul by freight rail. So that was an excellent little point that I got out of your presentation. So now we're going to turn it over to questions for the group, and I guess I'm going to ask as the moderator, Katie, do we have any in the queue?
We do not have any questions in the queue. I encourage you to submit them, but we have some prepared that we can go forward with.
Okay, wonderful. And Karen, if you'd like to turn your webcam on, I think we're all supposed to be up here and visible, but if you can, there you are. All right, wonderful. Well, I've got one that kind of, actually, I'll start with you, Stephanie. We'll go, we put you at the end, but now you're going to be first on the questions. How about that?
All right.
So I really was intrigued by, of course, I'm a Class 1 guy, so forgive me. All right, but I love the toys. I love the locomotives, and you talked about how you've got all Tier 4 locomotives, and I mean, you had to make that decision, I guess, a while back, right? It wasn't something that just, hey, COVID hits in March of this year and let's go Tier 4, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a difficult decision, but our board was committed to wanting to be aggressive given the air quality impacts in our region. And we were fortunate that actually one of the regulatory agencies locally actually had a significant grant program that would help incentivize it. But one of the challenges was there weren't many in the industry manufacturers that were looking at this technology. So being on the leading edge means that you're on the bleeding edge. And both on our side as well as the manufacturer, but we're really grateful for the progress. We're really happy with it. And we're excited again, as I hear Karen talk about Cummins and others, because we want to keep pushing. Our stretch goal is to see if we can be zero emissions in time for the 2028 Olympics that'll be here in the US.
Wow, that's a great goal and outstanding. Kudos to you for doing that. Katie, do we have any?
Hey, Daryl.
Yeah.
We do have a question from the audience.
Okay.
This question is, any insight into future collaboration among railroads, freight and passenger, for sustainability efforts rather than individual railroad efforts?
Stephanie has her hand up.
I'll just underscore again what BNSF is doing with Chicago Metra and opening it up to other commuter railroads, including Metrolink, in looking at the battery electric locomotive and really the feasibility. And I think that's a true public-private partnership. I think they're even working with Wabtec and others. But I think that's critical because as we advance these new technologies, it's really important on the passenger side that our freight partners not only be in the lead, but more importantly, it work for them because they really are the workhorse for this type of technology. And in my system, we share a lot of our corridor with the freight. You know, the freight class ones are the hosts, whether it's UP or BN. So it's a critical part in advancing a sustainable future, at least on the passenger rail side, to have that kind of partnership.
And I think
David,
I think it's a great.
Go ahead, Karen. I'm sorry.
No, I'm going to add to that. I think it's a great idea to have these partnerships because honestly, we can't go fast enough alone, right? So to go further faster, it's together. And, you know, the idea of, you know, whether it's a battery, you know, battery powered, whether it's fuel cell, whether, you know, hydrogen, what that means per region, you know, I think our partnership together could really help us, right, figure this out. You know, it's difficult. Infrastructure, batteries, it's a very confusing subject. So I think we all need each other.
Yeah, I would add, yes, if you guys would have let me talk about the BEL, the battery electric locomotive, unfortunately, I would have taken up the entire 45 minutes. So I didn't because I get really excited and geeky about that. But I will say, you know, thank you, Stephanie. It's nice to be appreciated for what the company is doing, and that is an exciting partnership. And you're right, that is, I think, truly a public-private partnership. I would also say that groups like this, the League of Railway Women, are how we do how we do collaborate on these things. So when LRW called BNSF and said, "Do you have somebody who's willing to talk about sustainability?" She happened to call our government affairs person, who called the VP of Environmental, and immediately, yeah, this was a priority. I have served on the board. I actually need to update. I forgot to update that I'm no longer the chair of the ARDA Environmental Committee because my term ended. But we use a lot of these committees as a way to, or these groups as a way to share ideas. And I encourage all the people on my team to belong to them because I think that they do come back with really great ideas about things they can do with their own railroads. And then also meeting people that they can have these collaborative relationships with.
Yeah, technology is a tricky one, right? I mean, it's one of those things where it's wonderful to embrace it, but when it doesn't work, what the people on the train want to know is, why didn't I get to work on time, right? I mean, there's always that aspect of it, and that's what makes us fearful sometimes to try to, you know, reach forward and grab the future. But what I've heard today from all of you is you're fearless. So I think I need to be on this panel more. I need to be less fearless like all of you. Katie?
We have another question. Speaking of fearless, here I am.
We did not practice that.
Another question from the audience here. How do you believe OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, and suppliers can best work together, and also railroads?
Karen, I think OEMs, that might be in your wheelhouse a little.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm part of or leading actually the Sustainability Council for the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. And how can we, because what's happening is going through we're all being expected to look through our supply base for sustainability and really start to push that. That's why, investors are asking, the new, rankers and raters are really pushing this. So it's becoming now the next thing, right? In addition to the products being used. And, I think if we could work together, as an industry, it's important that we all agree on what the priorities should be, to be honest. If not, then we all have our own. I mean, we're not an OEM, but like we would be answering everybody's specific questions, which generally your sustainability groups are actually quite small and they lead across, through a cross-functional, cross-business team. And so from different functions. And so I think it actually gives us an ideal opportunity, right, to define that with the OEMs, or what those priorities could be, based off the industry.
Thank you so much. We are at time. If people still have questions, we can collect them and get back to you on that. Yep, we're at 2:46.
Okay.
Well,
can I just a point of personal privilege? I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists. It was wonderful to work with you on this. Thank you so much for the effort and time you put into these presentations. They were excellent. A lot to go over here. We deserve 2 hours. That's all I'm going to say.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Please note the date of the next annual conference. It will be held in conjunction with Railway Interchange. And at that Railway Interchange, please note the membership meeting of LRW. And last but not least, we want to say thank you so much to our corporate sponsors who have made this session and the conference possible. Thanks again. Please join us for our next session. It's an evening social session with Michelle Malski at 6:30 Central Time. Bye now.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank
See
you.
everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Nice meeting you all.